humbly share this in an attempt to bring more light, faith, hope, and primarily honor to Hashem. I grew up in Savannah, Georgia, an historic, charming microcity on the southeast coast of Georgia. I had a secular education. Once I reached middle school, I became bored and uninterested. Although born Jewish, I was not really raised with any proper Judaic education, and my bar mitzvah was more of a bar than a mitzvah. At that juncture, I found more interest in music and playing the role of the rebellious class clown. My class clown antics led to several issues in schools. In high school, my interest orbited around music, mostly metal, punk, and alternative underground rock. My antics also continued, which led me to being dismissed from several schools. In the end, I graduated high school in 1990, but only after finishing summer school. During 11th and 12th grade, I was the lead singer of a band. I decided to give college a whirl after graduation. 3 months in, and the boredom overtook me. It was back to doing vocals in a band again. There where I would reside for well over a decade, holding odd jobs all along the way. My drive and passion were music, expression, and creativity. I enjoyed writing poetry, coloring with words, and crafting lyrics. Often the lyrical content would be abstract, metaphorical, or about political and social unrest, with sprinkles of humor thrown in for good measure. I had various hairstyles from long hair to mohawks to dreadlocks, and my hair was a spectrum of colors throughout those years. Rumblefish, Clown Knife, Dominion, Grum, and Vomitus were the name of the bands. It seemed each band got progressively heavier and more abrasive. Vomitus was the last real musical project I was involved with in the mid-90s. The lyrical content in Vomitus shifted from focusing on political and social unrest to a more spiritual one. Rather than looking outside and being reactive, I started looking inside, being introspective, in order to be more proactive. At that point, I was reading books on the occult, witchcraft, Wicca, and even Kabbalah. I infused the lyrics with the ideas gleaned from the readings. Vomitus took on a spiritual form as my spiritual proclivities grew stronger from my limited understanding of the readings. I was also influenced by hardcore punk bands like Bad Brains, Neurosis, early heavy metal band Iron Maiden, gothic and alternative underground music, as well as Dead Can Dance, just to name a few. I was romanticizing the darkness, and I was marinating in it in the process, and I was invoking and exposed to varying degrees of negativity. I was also searching and seeking. I wasn't really interested in organized religion. I wanted to know what was beyond music, language, notes, and beats, beyond the allure of the physical, the chaos and the debauchery. What's beyond science, math, and the arts? What came first, darkness or light? Nevertheless, Vomitus continued, and we did a U.S. tour in 1997. I remember distinctly one late night early morning after a concert in Chicago, I was hanging out with some people. We all noticed a bottle of Coca-Cola that had just got knocked over and was spreading across the table and dripping onto the floor. "This is the human condition," I said cryptically. The others just stared. I explained, if I would simply see the spilled brownish liquid, I'd have no idea what it was. Because I see the bottle, I know. The bottle, the parameters, helps give it form and definition. Humans are the same. We need guidelines if we are to flourish. No parameters, and we begin to spill all over the place. This idea crystallized once I became frum. Before, I had been pretty capricious and had few boundaries. As a matter of fact, I was trying to defy most boundaries at that time in my life. I found Judaism to be different. I have concluded it's the real counterculture. After some thought, I realized that by having parameters, I was freer. I was emancipated from the many destructive trappings and other things that enslaved me. Philosophically speaking, everything that exists consists of and is held together by boundaries and contours. We wouldn't be able to discern or distinguish one thing from another without boundaries and parameters. I was curating ideas, but still wrapped up in all that was hedonistic. Ultimately, Vomitus broke up and I returned to Savannah in 1998-99. I cut off my dreads and worked in a cafe during the day and a bar at night. Furthermore, I deliberately chose to take a headlong dive into darkness again by entertaining all sorts of carnalities and self-indulgences. At some point during that time, I moved to Providence, Rhode Island. I was a forklift operator there. I recall one day the manager asked me what religion I was. I answered I was born Jewish, but I don't practice or subscribe to any religion. I, however, did consider myself spiritual. When I answered I was born Jewish, he looked awestruck. He told me that he never met a Jewish person and said, "Your people have a special role to play." He went on to talk to me about this periodically. I continued to work at the factory, and like all other jobs, except for being in a band, I felt like a slave. At that point, my interest became piqued in the books on Kabbalah again, and as I read, I saw so many references to the Torah, I decided to go to the bookstore and pick up a copy of the Torah in English. I read it and felt at certain points an interesting stirring. The slavery especially spoke to me. I felt so enslaved at work and ensnared by the pernicious inclinations from the past and the present. After finishing what I read in the Chumash and looking back at the spiritual lyrics in the band, I had a bit of an epiphany. I began to connect the dots. I thought, all those years of blood, sweat, and tears in the band, spilling my guts out, wandering, searching, groping in the dark, and trying to find myself, I had at long last come to the realization that everything I was looking for and reaching out for was already inside of me, inside my Jewish heritage. I needed more meaning and purpose. There must be more to this life. As a result of the aforementioned, I subsequently decided to return to Savannah in 2000 and talk to someone about my spiritual awakening. I did not know at the time the distinction between the Reform, Conservative, or Orthodox Judaism, so I made an appointment with a Reform rabbi in Savannah, Georgia, Rabbi Belzer. I shared with him my story, and he stopped me midway and conveyed I'd be better off in the Orthodox community. He kindly gave me the number to Rabbi Yosef Edelstein. I felt a bit rejected, but followed up with Rabbi Edelstein. I went to his house and began discussing my story and interest in learning Jewish mysticism. He made a solid point by explaining that I should start with the basics. I was nearly 30 years old and did not even know the Aleph base, the Hebrew alphabet, so I was given a cassette tape to learn it. I developed a relationship with Rabbi Edelstein over the next several months. He put forth that maybe I'd be interested in going to yeshiva. I never heard of that word and had no earthly idea what it was. I just knew I was interested in going to Israel on a mystical odyssey. It was arranged for me to go to Aish Torah in Jerusalem. I sold all of my band equipment to facilitate the process. I was set up for an introductory to Judaism class in the Essentials program at Aish in Jerusalem. It was there I stayed and sometimes struggled for 8 months. It was simultaneously awe-inspiring and overwhelming. I initially didn't feel comfortable and was uncertain about my decision upon arrival. It was not easy adjusting at first. Looking back, I realized that the earlier punk and metal ethos of grit, willpower, and attitude propelled me to face the challenges and push through it even when I felt like I was in over my head. I lived in the old city in Jerusalem for about 8 months, from late 2000 to mid-2001. It was as if I was in an intellectual, emotional, and spiritual centrifuge. It was dizzying, beautiful, and an intense experience. However, I decided I needed to go back to the States after that and recalibrate. I returned to Savannah and was initially doing well. I had learned how to basically be an observant Jew. However, it wasn't long before I was backsliding into my old behavior patterns. After a while, I started hanging out at my old stomping grounds and haunting areas and activities that were still haunting me. Slowly but surely, I slipped back into my old ways. My observance was weakening. It probably would have kept spiraling from there, but one night, on the way out to have a few drinks, I heard the sounds of a brutal car accident from a block away. I ran over to see what happened and saw a person pinned underneath a Jeep. I was able to get some people together and we lifted the vehicle off the victim. I then got down on one knee and asked him, "Sir, can you hear me?" He didn't respond. I grabbed his hand. He then squeezed my hand, and as the paramedics approached, I asked him if he was okay. He looked deep into my eyes, squeezed my hand intently, and said, "Everything's kosher." At that moment, time froze. Those words reverberated in my mind and penetrated every fiber of my being. I was shaken to my core. The sheer intensity of the scene and hearing those words left me rattled, chilled, and perplexed. As I was seemingly falling away from all that I was inculcated with in Israel, this event occurs? Was this some sort of sign for me to kosher myself? This, plus the cataclysm of 9/11, really affected me and had me questioning myself and life in general. Maybe I needed to get back on track, I thought. Rabbi Edelstein noticed I was struggling too and asked if I'd like to try yeshiva in America, or Sameach in Monsey, New York, to be specific. I was apprehensive and approached it with some trepidation. I wasn't sure if I wanted to make a full commitment. At any rate, I took the opportunity to go up for Shabbos and check it out. There, I met Rabbi Naftali Reich and was able to sit in on some classes as well. After meeting Rabbi Reich, I sensed I needed to get back to my learning, and I decided to go to Or Sameach in Monsey. During my time in Muncie, I also met Odette and Sherry Scher, who were friends with Schifra Finkel. The Schers suggested that I reach out to Schifra and talk to her. I wasn't fully sure of the situation, so I didn't call immediately. Fast forward a few months later, and I saw her number on the top of some notes I had taken. I decided to run it up the flagpole and see if it flies, so I called her out of the blue. She answered, and we had an amazing, in-depth conversation. I was impressed by her and a bit taken back because she was from Lakewood, New Jersey, and had grown up from birth. I was raised secular and a metal punk vocalist from Savannah, Georgia, with no real Jewish education. Two worlds collided, yet harmony was on the horizon. We started dating. It wasn't easy initially being from such different backgrounds. We had to go through a lot to get to where we got. But we persisted and ended up getting married in 2003. She finished nursing school, started working, and I started graduate school. We lived in an apartment complex in Muncie, New York. We had our first child, Shy. I graduated from school in New York City and started working in my field. My father unexpectedly passed away shortly thereafter, and we ultimately decided to move to Savannah to help my mother. We moved to Savannah in late 2008, and we've been living there ever since. My wife continues to work as a nurse, and I'm a psychotherapist at a psychiatric inpatient facility and have a private practice as well. We also had 2 more children, Esther and Nitzevet. If not for my wife and our children, I wouldn't be here today. I also released 2 books, The Infinity Frequency and Universal, in 2020. I always tell people the best decision I ever made was to return to my Jewish roots. From there, everything began to gradually fall into place. Picture this. Imagine being at a venue, watching a band and seeing the singer on the stage with long dreadlocks, dressed in all black, covered in tattoos and piercings, and someone turning to you and saying, "See that guy up there growling and screaming into a microphone and jumping around all over the place? Well, he's going to end up an Orthodox Jew, marry a rabbi's daughter, practice as a psychotherapist, and be the president of a synagogue in Savannah, Georgia." That guy? No way. It would be totally far-fetched to even consider that. Well, thank you, Hashem, it actually happened. There must be a Hashem, because I couldn't do it and conceive it by myself. My simple message to everyone, including the marginalized, disaffected, and/or disconnected, is whatever you've been through or are going through, nothing is worth disposing of your heritage and roots. We all have our personal battles, both internally and externally. You're not alone. You can return. Our pitfalls and negativity are not an indictment on our character and do not define us. You are not the darkness you endured. You are the light that refused to surrender. The door is always open and the light is always on. There is a way out of the darkness and a return to the light. There's a saying, the wound is where the light goes in, and turn your wounds into wisdom. Looking back and forward, there was, is, and always will be lights along the way interspersed with darker periods. We all have to seek and search through various forms of static in life to get to the next clean station, for life is an ongoing journey traversing from static to clear reception. With Hashem's help, I was able to build a beautiful, frum Jewish family. I still struggle like all human beings. I once heard, we are human beings, but we are also human becomings, always in the process of rising and falling, waxing and waning, and trying to grow from it all and become greater. In retrospect, not only was my previous life not an impediment for me to find the path, but my early struggles helped me navigate many challenges that present themselves to me daily. It's not about fitting in, it's about figuring out. Rabbi Tatz draws from the Zohar a quote that I've tattooed in my mind. Through the darkness of ordeals, the light of personal growth is revealed. The challenges and the struggles aren't in the way, they are the way. With faith, courage, patience, and compassion, we can incrementally not only go through it, but we can also grow through it as we work towards being better versions of ourselves. We must strive to break the klippos, elevate the sparks, and bring more light and shefa. For we are not human beings having a spiritual experience, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And well, there you have it, the Cliff Notes and highly abridged version of my life up until this point in 2026. This story is less about me and more about Hashem. It's all from Hashem, Ein Od Milvado. I truly thank each of you for your time and attention. I hope this provides some inspiration and encouragement that change is possible, not perfect, but possible. I wish you only the brightest of blessings on this journey in this life.